bounce back from the challenges and the changes that will determine how successful you're going to be. Michael Lysenblatt is a resilience expert who helps people achieve more in high-pressure environments by bouncing back from pressures and setbacks. And believe me, it's such an amazing skill to have. Over 20 years ago, Michael became one of the pioneers in building a successful natural therapies business through overcoming market rejection, refusals, and knockbacks. Since that time, Michael has helped hundreds of companies such as Coles Myer, Morris Blackburn Lawyers, Optus, Toyota, Smartline, St George, and MLC all learn how to bounce back so that they can out-achieve their competition and be the best they can be. Michael is the author of a book called Pressure Proof, and today Michael will be talking about building pressure-proof teams and thriving in tough and competitive environments by drawing on his unique blended background of psychology, shiatsu, and over 25 years of martial arts experience. And I've been told not to upset him. Please welcome Michael Lysenblatt.
Thank you very much. All right, let's change the pace a little bit from what we've had so far. We've talked a lot about business and how you manage business, how you manage people. But I want to put the focus a little bit differently, put it actually back onto you as individuals. No doubt you would have already hit the ground running. We've had more to do than time available already this week. You would have had endless calls, meetings, emails to get to, lots of things to fulfill for many people who have unrealistic time frames and crazy deadlines, and you've also got your personal life to arrange as well. Now, your world as entrepreneurs is a lot to do with energy out. There's a lot of giving to other people and solving other people's problems. And I reckon in the room here today we have three different types. We've got those who have been in business for some time, those who are just sort of starting out and trying to find their feet, and those that are kind of yet to discover that they are going to be entrepreneurs and are about to take their next step. So what I want to look at today is how you as individuals thrive when you're dealing with setbacks, challenges, pressures, rejections, so that you and your team actually can be the best versions of yourself. So here's what I'd like to do is take the focus off the business and put it back onto you. So do me a favour, with your right hand, please just point to yourself. And please turn to the person next to you and say to them, mate, it's all about me. It is. It is. Some of you already knew that, so that's a good start. That's nice. I want to start by actually asking you a personal question. And that is, do you think you're smart?
Yep.
Yep, some confidence there. Do you think you're clever? Yep, some nods there. You're definitely some confidence. Okay, let's put this on a scale. Let's see how this sits on a scale. If we were to put it between, say, 0 to 10, where would you put yourself in terms of sort of smarts, in terms of IQ? Would you say you're kind of a 1 to 4? Would you say, no, I'm sort of more of a 5 to 7? Or would you go, hang on, I'm up here, I'm actually more of an 8 to 10? Where would you sit in terms of smarts? Just tell the person next to you. Go. All right, thank you. So now it's time to work out to see who's in the room. Just with a show of hands, who would say that you are a 1 to 4? Show of hands, 1 to 4? Yeah, 1, 2 in the room, okay. It's been said that there are 9 different types of intelligences. So if you put yourself in terms of 1 to 4 in terms of IQ, you're usually off the scale in another area of smarts. Okay, where are my 5 to 7s? 5 to 7s? Oh, you're a modest lot, yes. That's a very nice, safe place to be, 5 to 7, that's right. And can I now see, where are my 8 to 10s? 8 to 10, oh, thank you. Please keep your hands up, right? Can everyone else in the room have a look around to see where the 8s to 10s sit? Because this is proof that you can be smart and sexy at the same time. But I think you realise that being smart is not enough in business, is it? It isn't enough to know product, it isn't enough to know process, it isn't enough to know software. It's just simply not enough to be able to be successful. You've got to be able to deal with the setbacks, the rejections, the tough times, the self-doubt, the others who doubt you, that when you put so many things forward and put so much effort in, and it all just falls apart. When people are not buying or not interested, you have to work hard, and you're dealing with all that oppression, all that difficulty. How you handle that is going to determine how effective and how successful you and those of you who have teams are going to be under pressure. So we can appreciate, and I don't want to make you feel unmotivated, but the reality is, business is tough. The research that shows us that this is not an easy industry to be in basically has revealed that about 60% of businesses fail in the first 3 years, and I think that's rather conservative. That pressure alone from being in business, where studies have found 67% have found that they've decided to switch careers because of the pressure they had in their work area. 85% said their job intruded with their personal life, and 42%, almost half, are losing sleep because of pressure. What we also find here is that 38% of business owners have a high level of stress every single day. So the pressure that you are having and are about to have more of is real, it's significant. And it has an impact on how proactive and how effective you're going to be driving your business, getting funding, getting product to market, all those things. Here's what we understand, particularly from the point of view of getting noticed in the marketplace. We know this, that 75% of sales require 5 follow-up calls after a meeting. However, 44% give up after the first follow-up because of the fear of rejection, because no one wants it. We also know this, that 80% of prospects will say no 4 times before they say yes. So we need to understand, how do we use pressure to our advantage? How do we, as the picture says, take from coal, turn coal into diamonds? With the right type of pressure, we actually become the best version of yourself. And this is what I want to talk about. When you hear the self-doubt in your head going, I don't know if I can do this. I have been doing this for so long and it's just not working. Maybe it's just not for me. And when you hear that voice, how do you get past that? Or when you've been trying something and you're running out of money, you go, I don't know if we're going to find enough funding. I don't know if this is going to work. How do you deal with that? And also the self-doubt of everything else. Everyone's saying it's not going to work, but you have to push back and have the grit. How do you deal with that? That is the currency of success that I see in business. And we've seen this. Nelson Mandela puts this beautifully. He says the greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but rising every time we fall. And that's what I want you to understand, is that this is a tough thing to do. Business is tough. So we want to understand how best to get through it. And this is how I got into this industry. For me, after finishing my training in psychology, I became a practitioner in shiatsu, which no, it's not a dog, but it's like acupuncture without needles. Had my own practice for about 7 years, worked with about 4,000 people through that time, and saw firsthand how pressure came in a pattern. That what you saw from a symptom wasn't what you get. That a sore neck here was sometimes caused by a tight hip here. That a headache here can be caused by a lower back here. And if you just look at the symptom, you miss the picture. And in the same way, pressure has a pattern. When you are under pressure, you would default to a certain habit of behaviour that will either drive your business or stop it in its teeth, right in its shoes. And because we are creatures of habit, we just default to the same pattern over and over again unless we change it. I'll give you an example just from where you are. Could you just fold your arms? Great. Could you now fold them the other way? Feels strange, doesn't it? Because we like to do things in certain ways. With your right hand, could you please shake the hand of the person next to you with your right hand? Great, thank you. You do the same thing now, but with your left hand. Feels wrong, doesn't it? It's wrong to shake them now. Why would you do that? Because we are creatures of habit. We like to do things in certain ways. So when you are under pressure, when you're facing self-doubt, you will just default back into what's the most ingrained behaviour pattern that you've had, maybe since you're age 5. But you just default straight back to that. There are a couple of patterns, though, I want to let you know about so that you can identify what your pattern might look like. I reckon it looks like this. Under pressure, your resilience sometimes can be down what's called fracture. When you're under pressure, just things break. When sometimes we are down there, what happens? We become destructive. Everything is hard and difficult and negative. Oh, no, clients aren't calling back. Technology's not working. It's just I can't get the idea off the ground. Well, how was your weekend? Oh, not long enough. You know, everything is hard and difficult, right? And when we're in that position, we become like the bad strawberry in a good bunch. So if you're working with a team, it brings everyone down. Your energy becomes really draining, and we become unproductive. Our tension is high, and our response to new ideas or to change becomes resistant. I don't want to hear it, it won't work, and we become negative and resistant. Sometimes, though, the pattern looks more like fragile. You know, I'm feeling a bit sensitive, a bit fragile, which simply means under pressure, I get disengaged. I'm over it. Sometimes there's too many things go wrong, it's too hard, too difficult, and I just think, you know, lights are on but no one's home. You know, I'd rather be having a glass of red or four, ignoring my day, and just hoping everything goes away, everything is better. And if you've ever been to a fast food store and you've been served by a 15-year-old whose parents have told them to go and get a job, you know what disengaged feels on the other side of customer service. Yeah? So when you or your team default to disengage, just oh, I've just got to get through, you know, what happens is we become unenthused. So we're not motivated, we fall behind on our to-do list. No matter what kind of you know, time management you put in place, we never get it done. Our tension is high and we feel always overwhelmed. I'm always feeling like I'm drowning under pressure. And in those two modes, what we do is we actually suffer under pressure. We suffer our way through. Sometimes, though, the habit or the pattern looks a little bit different. Sometimes we get into the blue zone. And we go to a stage which we feel under pressure, we become stable. And what we might do is go through a stage where we're coasting. I'm just getting through, I'm ticking the boxes, I'm doing whatever I need to get done. I'm not changing the world, I'm not really taking any new initiatives, but I'm just doing what I need to do. In an employment role, what that looks like is that I'm just doing things so that I go under the radar. I can't be faulted for what I'm doing, but I'm really not going over and beyond. In your own business, it means that you're kind of coasting through, but you're really not thinking outside of just getting into things. And as a result, your energy becomes more withdrawn. We don't actually get out and talk, we don't make the calls, we're not very good with people. As a result of that, our work is it's consistent, and our response to pressure and tension, to challenges, we become compliant, sure, we'll do it, but there's no great enthusiasm. So yeah, I'll make the changes, but I'm kind of like, I'll drag myself through. The next one, though, I reckon a lot of people in the room can relate to. And this is where under pressure you become robust. It simply means this: you can take stuff. Life can throw things at you and you will cope, you'll manage. And I reckon everyone in the room here has an element of robust. And in fact, you wouldn't be here unless you have an element of robust to you. And what robust looks like is that you become driven. You know, you're focused, I'm working early, I'm working late, it's kind of go, 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 and you know, I'm really getting things done. I'm driven by adrenaline, by caffeine, and by sugar. It's just making my day just hum along just nicely. I'm working faster. In fact, one of the signs to know if you're in the driven stage, if someone asks you how you are, and if your response is, oh, I'm busy, that's where you are. Because what will happen, you have this conversation between a couple of driven people. One says, yeah, I'm really busy. Another one turns up and goes, oh, you think you're busy? Man, I am super busy this week. But the third comes in and goes, no, I'm crazy busy this week. And busyness becomes our badge of honor of how productive and how much we work. The thing is, though, robust and driven, it feels good because it's driven by adrenaline, it's driven by sugar and caffeine. It feels good. But it looks like this. We go, 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 then we crash. Recover, go, 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 crash. Recover. But then go, 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 crash. That recovery starts taking a little bit longer. Go, 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 crash. That takes a little bit longer. And that crash can be physically, I'm exhausted. It can be mentally, I just can't get my head back into the game. Emotionally, I just can't face more of these anymore. I'm done. The crash looks different depending on who you are and where you operate from. And therefore, our medium level of tension will become very reactive. Now, this is actually a good place to be able to manage. If you can get to driven, that you're getting things done. The challenge, though, particularly as you run a business, driven allows you to keep your head above water-ish, but it means you are going, but you're not growing. You're not getting smarter, better. You're just doing everything faster, and therefore your business isn't progressing because you're so busy touching everything. you're not going to be able to take on new ideas and evolve. And it's kind of like coping. None of you can't cope, but you cope at a cost. You'll cope at a cost. At the cost of growth, at the cost of well-being, at the cost of actually understanding what potential your business could be, but we're stuck in this treadmill. Robust is kind of like where we're on the treadmill, or I'm in the grind, or I'm in the rut. It's same, different day, same stuff, and we're not progressing faster. And the trap you've got is that it feels good, and it's a natural default, particularly those of you that have really good work ethic, you'll get trapped into robust unless you look outside of that. In his book, Anti-Fragile, Nassim Nicholas Taylor talks about the state called anti-fragile, by which he means pressure should bring out the best version of you. Kind of like when you go to a gym and you work out, the muscles should grow because of the pressure you put them under. People also should. He says anti-fragility is beyond resilience and robustness. It's beyond just coping. He talks about the idea that resilience resists shock and stays the same, but the anti-fragile gets better. As you are your businesses, for many of you, the energy you turn up with is the energy that's going to drive the expansion and the launch of your business. How you relate to pressure, if you're not getting better, you're repeating the same thing over and over again. We're staying still. This is why I want to look at this whole concept of being pressure-proof. This doesn't mean doing more. It's actually what's called high performance, which is simply the best version of you, which sometimes means saying no to things. It sometimes means actually I need to stop now so that I can refuel and do the best thing by me. It sometimes means being a little bit more discerning between where you put your energy and what people you talk to and what events you get to and how you operate your time. So it's not about working faster, it's actually about being smarter with where you put your time, your energy and your focus. Because your tension's much lower and you become a lot more agile. In other words, I'm not just reacting, I'm looking at what's ahead. I'm going, how do I need to adapt myself to the future that's a month, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months away in my thinking in my business? So my question for you, are we suffering, coping, or are we thriving? Where do we think we sit, that you sit amongst all of these? Now, okay, you could say I'm all of these things, and yes, that's fine. This is not your personality type. This just means under pressure, do you start here? Do sometimes things put you down there? Do you crawl your way back there? Are you sometimes up here? What particular pattern are you finding yourself under, say, the last week or so? Have a quick chat to the person next to you. Go. Take 5 seconds to finish, 5 seconds. Nice, and time. The interesting thing is this, you may go, well, sometimes I start here, but life pushes me down there, and I manage to get back there. All very normal. Here's the interesting thing. Those of you that are leaders of people, those of you that have teams, need to know where you sit because your energy will affect everyone else. Let's say this, let's get rid of these 2 middle columns and take this one over here. Your leadership, if you sit in one of the lower columns, what's happening here? If you turn up and under pressure, you're fractured, you're destructive, and you're resistant, you become more of a persecutor type of leader. We look for who we can tear apart. The team becomes hostile because you sit here. If you sit more in the fragile area, if you become disengaged and overwhelmed, as a leader, I'm looking to see who can I blame? Who can I blame for the problem? And therefore the team becomes somewhat fragmented. If you default to stable, just kind of get through and you become more within yourself and not part of the team, you tend to manage people and the team is somewhat competent in what they do. So who you are and how you turn up will affect the way you work. The robust will work on motivating the team and the team will become more competitive and it has that go, go, go. But the pressure proof, those, if you sit in high performance, your leadership style is one more of enabling people. And therefore you create people that are inspired to be somewhere. So it determines on where you sit and your leadership style as to how that actually works for you. Now, you're very welcome to get a photo of that, but if you want to get a summary, on your chairs there, I've put a format here. There's a white paper I've put together called Pressure Proof People. Happy to get a copy to you. I'll put it into a PDF and email it out to you. Fill that in and hand it to me after my session. So that you can get that. There's no cost involved with that, but you just get a copy and you get a summary of some of these key points. It looks a bit like that. Here's the interesting thing though. How do we do that? Now I want to bring your attention back to here. Before I talked about IQ, but there's another measure of intelligence that I want to bring us back to. It's one called RQ, and be careful how you say this. And this looks at your ability to bounce back, to get to those higher levels of performance. And this was taught to me actually initially by a physics teacher who was talking about the physics of collisions, and I wasn't quite getting what he was talking about. He said energy never dissipates, it always transfers, and I was at the back of the class, it really wasn't sinking in. So he goes, okay, Michael, let me show it to you this way. And he grabs two things. He grabs a ball and he grabs an egg. He says, Mike, if you put an egg under pressure, it cracks. The energy it has before is different to the energy it has now. It's dissipated, it's gone somewhere else. And I reckon sometimes under pressure, we can become a bit like the egg and go to some of those lower levels. We can become annoyed, frustrated, despondent, we second guess ourselves, even to the point of feeling unwell and exhausted. Can I ask here, who knows someone that when they're under pressure are a bit like the egg? Let's see a show of hands. You know someone? Right, thank you. Who in the past has worked with someone a bit like the egg? Let's see a show of hands. Right, who's married to someone a bit like the egg? Yeah, a brave person puts their hand up. My teacher didn't grab the ball. So as you put a ball under pressure, it bounces and it comes back to the same position, if not higher. It uses the energy to recover. And what we want to think about is not about perfection, not about always being great and happy and fine and high five. This is not life. This is ridiculous kind of approach of always being everything's great. But rather, how do we bounce more than we break? How do we get to that high performance level more than we go to the lower levels? With that thinking in mind, I want to take you through one idea. And it's the idea here that you need to change your relationship with failure. Because you're going to face a stack of it. That's not being pessimistic, that's just realistic. In business, you will face a stack of failure. Your relationship with failure will determine if you bounce more than you break. So here's something interesting. You are designed by nature to be self-preservating. Your body is designed by nature to stay in one place and to be alive. For example, if I took this remote control and I threw it at you, what's your first reaction to it? Dark, some of you go block, some of you put your compass, put your hand up, just catch that. But the idea is to actually, your hands protect your body, right? Because under pressure, your body is instinctively, it tells itself to stay alive, which is great so that we don't do things like touching hot stoves or going out and walking into traffic, so that's an important thing. However, there's another aspect as well that we are designed for emotional protection as well, which simply means this: whenever I am out of my comfort zone, and I'm possibly going to face a rejection or a problem, I'm going to call a client, I'm going to call someone who might get some funding, I'm going to try something that might fail, part of my brain goes, no, don't do that because you look stupid. Don't do that because you're going to look incompetent. Don't do that because people will start talking or people will start to know that you're not good enough. Don't do that because that will reveal that you really are an imposter. You actually can't do what you're saying you can do. And because of that, we stop getting out of our comfort zone. The fear of failure will hold us in our comfort zone. And what happens then is our comfort zone becomes our prison. In business, I'm asking you to do something that's kind of counterintuitive. I'm saying that even though we're designed to be safe, you need to not be safe from the emotional side. You need to risk failure, risk something going wrong in order to grow. Otherwise, you're stuck in driven, coasting, and down destructive and disengaged. You're stuck there. Pressure proof requires a risk. In his work, you know Simon Sinek's work, the book with Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last, he talks about how the generation today coming through school aren't exposed to enough failure. I mean, we've taken away scoring from sports. We give medals for kids turning up. We'll give extensions if things are over time. You know, we're really not letting them get exposed to failure. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that if I ever fell behind on my payments on my mortgage, I wouldn't get a call from at my front door from the bank manager going, mate, I can see things are tough, I just want to give you a cuddle. You know, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. Because we're not exposed to enough failure, and as a result of that, we're not learning how to be familiar with that. So when failure comes around, we either jump back from it or it really destroys us, but it shouldn't. Because failure is a necessary thing as part of success. Some of the most successful people are the biggest failures. I think it was Thomas Edison who failed over 1,800 experiments before getting the light bulb right. Colonel Sanders was knocked back by over 1,000 chicken stores before getting his recipe out. Right. Dr. Seuss was knocked back by over 27 publishers before getting the Cat in the Hat to publish. We had Walt Disney was knocked back by over 302 banks. I mean, I would have got the message after the first four, you know, but 302 banks. Coke only sold about 400 sodas in their first year, and Columbus, he was looking for India. You know, some of the most successful people are the biggest stuff-ups. You need to make sure your relationship with failure is a kind one. And the thinking behind that that allows you to be more pressure-proof is simply this. Number one, are you having more surgical thinking? Now, I want to clarify. I want my surgeon to be the most detail-oriented, anal-retentive surgeon on the planet. I want to make sure that when she operates on me, I am having no problems, no complications. She knows what she's doing. Everything is fine. Because for a surgeon, problems end up in lawsuit or death, so not good. However, the scientists understand that stuff's going to go wrong. I'm going to test things. I'm going to test hypotheses. I'm going to get things wrong, and that's okay. And I want you to question, how are you approaching the launch and trying things out in your business? Are you approaching it with surgical thinking, oh, I want to get this right, if it doesn't, you know, it's going to really upset me, I'm going to really feel heartbroken? Or are you more scientific to go, look, we're going to try a bunch of things, we're going to see what works, and we're going to be okay if it doesn't? Have a quick chat with the person next to you. What are you doing now? Are you surgical thinking or scientific thinking? Good chat, go. Nice, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. Here's what I want you to think about. That in life, when you launch your business, things are going to go wrong. That's not pessimistic, that's realistic. Your relationship with failure is going to determine how well you're going to keep applying different ideas, and your ability to recover quickly from a setback is going to determine how profitable and productive you will be personally. So I wish you every success in realizing that it's okay to fail as long as you bounce back fast. So those of you that would like the white paper, just fill in the form and maybe pass it all into the middle aisle there, and as I walk through, we'll just collect it all through as we go through. But if any questions, ask. Otherwise, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much, and also for your generous offer.
Thank you very much.
I'll give everyone just a couple of seconds to fill out the form.
Lovely. Wonderful. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Michael, will you also be around for our afternoon break and maybe some networking?
Possibly not.
Okay.
Possibly not.
All right.
Really not sure.
Sure.
Yes.
If there's any other forms, we can pass them on to Karen.
I've got yours.
Thank you so much, Michael. Okay, I'll keep going because time is of the essence and we've got so much to still continue with today. Katie Heathcote is a senior trade and investment advisor for FinTech at Austrade and has been there since 2017, June. Her remit is to support Australian FinTech, blockchain and AI companies to go global and she also assists foreign companies in these realms into Australia. Before being appointed to Austrade, she worked for the UK Department of International Trade as an investment manager for 4 years. She holds a Master's in International Relations and a Bachelor of Economics and Finance. Before joining the government, she worked in the superannuation industry at KPMG. Please welcome Katie Heathcote.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me, Karen. This is an amazing opportunity, and I must say I'm kind of intimidated. The speakers have been amazing, so hopefully you take away some cool stuff from mine as well. So I'm talking about scaling internationally. This is what I live and breathe daily. So I just wanted to share some insights because I did live overseas in the US, Boston last year, and obviously worked quite extensively in the UK market as well. So often I want to expand overseas, my product's not working here, and I watch a Silicon Valley TV show, so therefore I'll have more success there. No, it doesn't work that way. So I guess the question is, do you have capital to actually do this? Are you looking to get investment, which is common, and that's absolutely fair. Like, you can only raise so much domestically before looking offshore for further funds. Is the market saturated where you're looking to go to? Is there actually a product market fit? The amount of people that actually wanted to set up in the UK, for example, because they went on a tiki tour when they were 21 and wanted to live in London, or have family there, or just want to move to Bath, for example. I think you just really actually need to look, well, this makes sense for my business, and then all the other stuff should follow. And more importantly, do you actually have a customer there? There's often, I need to set up in this market in Singapore, but actually I've got customers in Canada. That actually happens too. The pitch. So I've started playing guitar, and it's a learning progress, and I'm failing, but also learning a lot. And it was quite clear to me, my little niece frowned at me when I played her a tune and went, ooh, no. However, when my husband played, it was all good and smiles all around. So I think at times I needed to practice more for my audience, and often at times I've seen, and also I know people in the audience have seen, Australians go offshore, speak at international conferences, and we really downplay ourselves and go on and on and on, and the nervous energy just keeps going and going, and we're just sitting in the audience going, no, please. And when we see Americans do it, it's a slick, well-confident, structured piece. And I think we really need to, we are really disadvantaging ourselves by winging it. We need to actually practice. This is what we spend 24/7 of our day doing. When we have the 2 minutes in the elevator with an investor, we need to be ready to go and be able to sell ourselves. The last thing you want is the violin to squeak. So doing your homework on who you're meeting, and also women generally, we're pretty much on the back foot with investment. That's statistically shown, and we can't change the way the world is programmed, but we just need to be aware that there will be unconscious bias, and then you can basically, as studies show that when women pitch, often we're asked, how do you fix a problem? How do you fix the spilt milk? So when men pitch, they get asked, how can you promote this thing? And I think we as an audience just need to be aware, actually, how can I turn that around to be better for me? So I get people more likely to invest in me if I end up being positive rather than talking about how I'd fix the spilt milk. So all very interesting. So also do your homework on who you're meeting, but also bring it into the cultural context. And sometimes you need your business partners in that room with you if it makes sense to do so. Put yourselves in the investor's shoes. At times, Australians go, I just want to raise 5 million. An investor in Boston couldn't care less. They're looking at 50. Like, let's get real here. Is this worth my time? Because it's meant to be strategic, and 5 million is nothing to me. I'm about to go on a sailboat around the Caribbean. So just putting ourselves in a bigger sort of arena is helpful. The next piece. So, I love the Avengers, and I think everyone in that team brings attributes and superpowers that makes them work. And when the bad guys come, well, they can, obviously perform. So, hiring when you're looking at overseas is the same sort of deal when you're looking here domestically. Hire really slow, and often we want to rush it because we're like, oh, I have to fly to London, 24 hours, damn it. This is a big time and cost on me. I just want to hire someone, get that up and running. No, take your time, because that person's likely going to be on an isolated island who won't be able to contact you in broad daylight. So you need to make sure you're selecting someone that actually cares about your product and is committed to you. And often I see consultants hired to remedy that situation, and that does work in the short term, but sometimes it's a headache because the consultant has a few fingers in different pies, and then they're actually not in the best interest of your company, and getting rid of them, particularly in Europe, is really, really hard. So basically, I heard from an exceptional speaker that you want to hire people that fill in the plugs that you're bad at. For example, I don't like the detail, I like to have the vision, and then you can focus on the vision and the dream of your company, so don't be afraid to delegate. So the stuff, the boring stuff, allow time, and then allow more time. The time it takes to set up overseas. A bunch of stuff can happen that's completely out of your control, but the things you could and should be thinking about are listed. So from visas, the paperwork can be quite intense depending on where you're looking to set up. Hiring staff, again, will take time. Look at about 6 months minimum. Bank accounts, anti-money laundering doesn't help your cause in some markets, and being a fintech, you're even further on the back foot because the bank doesn't want to let you set up, and let alone cryptocurrency. Registering an entity can sometimes take 48 hours or can sometimes take 6 months. So, and also bear in mind, your employees will want medical coverage, so particularly in America, you're looking at $7,000 a year on top of their salary. So we are the lucky country that we have things like Medicare. Okay. And I think sometimes when we look at going global, we often ask ourselves, do I need to actually go to that country? Yes and no, you can still live in Australia, but don't forget that most of the world doesn't actually travel. I found this, I think British people do come out here and they don't have that mindset, but they do often say it is a long way to go. Yeah. And the US people, I think 1 in 10 have a passport, so even though we're happy to travel, have that expectation that they're probably not going to travel to where, so you need to meet them. And often where you go, some countries are more sensitive to hierarchy. So in the UAE, for example, if I'm not meeting with the founder, I don't care. So bear in mind where and when you need to be seen, and that goes in Japan as well. Generally speaking, people want to do deals and business with founders. So don't underplay the value of FaceTime, getting on the plane, because we know that no robust discussions will be done on video conference. And don't underestimate, okay, it's all great for the air miles, but the impacts that will have on your family, friends, and your business back home. Particularly investors, the last thing they want is to see you get on a plane back home. For example, when I was in Boston, I told people I was only there for 3 months. And what happened was people would actually turn away. I was like, oh, okay. So I pretended I was there for a very long time, and then people started to take me seriously. So if you're serious about a market, you need to be there if you're the founder. If that means for going back in and out, sure, that's fine, but don't expect that you will be able to build a business or hire good people unless you're invested in that country. And people know when you're invested in that country because doors will start to open, but if you hop on a Qantas plane back to Sydney, you're not going to get anywhere. Okay. So I'll touch on cultural sensitivities. So I meant China, Japan, and Korea. We place as a high cultural sensitivity. So they don't like conflict, they like the FaceTime, and it's a lot of tea ceremonies, it's a lot of yum chow lunches. sometimes a bit of drinking, a lot of informal activities. So looking at Asia, you need to be able to invest the time. It's not going to be like the US. For example, when you set up a meeting in the US, it's I expect to hear from you in an hour, or I've forgotten about you because I'm a New Yorker and I've got not much time on my hands. In Asia, it's I want to know about the detail and I want to know if I can trust you. And also getting paid can be different. So our concept of time, I turn up for a meeting at 9, I place an invoice. It's all cool in Australia, I get that system. Not everywhere is like that. So an invoice is not just an invoice. There's a negotiation informally around that invoice. Deadlines, time is completely on a different scale. So for example, Latin America, 9 a.m. maybe 10 a.m. and India particularly as well. So bear in mind the time. Also getting around Jakarta, 3 meetings a day, that's the whole day. So the traffic is the worst in the world. So all these little things, that's why you need to do your research and hopefully use Austrade to help guide you. Do your due diligence, and I put the monster on the bed because sometimes you don't know what monsters are lurking. Having outside interest in your company is good, but often Australians are like, oh, that's great, these people want to invest in me, how amazing is this? But time and time again, Katie, I wish I'd never done that. This was a waste of time. I can't get in touch with the investor. They've got 15% of my company now, and then suddenly I'm being replaced as CEO, which I've actually seen in the last 6 months, quite a lot of CEOs, in fact, founders being replaced by their board. So do your due diligence. The amount that a venture capitalist, for example, does on you, you need to replicate back. So you know who exactly you're bringing into the team. Are they the right fit? Are they going to be a strategic alliance? Are they actually going to help you grow and scale? So you can get stung any place in the world, and I just wanted to touch on the IP issue. This is where the due diligence comes in. There's a lot of countries in the world which will basically steal your IP. So make sure that, I think a lot of companies say, I've made it so complicated that there's no way they could replicate this, but that's something you need to bear in mind. Do all the legalities, know how to protect yourself, because it can leave you wounded. And I just met with a company this morning and said, I'm not touching China after a really bad experience. So don't just go in blindfolded, like know who you're dealing with. Yeah, cool. So in other words, know when to say no. Think outside the box. Often we go to the US or the UK because we speak the same language and have the same law. I'm not saying that's fine, but also my job at Austrade wouldn't be my job if I didn't tell you that Indonesia is actually our closest neighbour and it's one of the fastest growing economies by 2050, and is the 3rd fastest in the G20. And Latin VC funding actually surpassed China and India in the last year. So I guess what I'm saying is, if your customers are in those markets, yes, that makes sense, but also there's a big wide world out there that we're not taking advantage of, and it actually may make more sense for you to explore the unknown. Who in your network can help me? Austrade has 84 offices worldwide with Australian trade commissioners as well as locally engaged staff who can help you. So please use us. So Australians, one big thing in the US, one little story was, it was clear to me in my first 2 weeks, I wasn't really getting anywhere. I was sarcastic. I had too much modesty. Australia invented Wi-Fi. We're pretty amazing, aren't we? The Americans just dismissed me. So then I was like, yeah, we're amazing. And it was clear that I had to back the substance up with the charm. A lot of the time it was a lot of charm, but in America that is. So I felt that once I started to really boast and say, yes, we can do this, and we have, at the time, open banking CDR, Americans took notice. And I think, I didn't use the sarcasm ever again, but then they started to go, okay, we'll have coffee meetings with you. And I always made sure that there was an objective there. like, I'm not just meeting with you for the sake of catching up, I actually want to get 1, 2, 3 from you. And then they responded well, and I didn't use LinkedIn when I was there that much to connect with people because they don't like it. So little things like that all make a difference. So I will really fast forward because we're running short on time, but I guess I'm just imploring you all, go for coffee meetings, network, ask for help and advice, and don't set up meetings without a clear objective. Always do your background checks, and always remember good manners and etiquette. It will get you far, and expect knockbacks to be turned down, but keep persevering. So, just on the Austrade pitch, we have entered into a new deal with WeWork. So WeWork obviously has a number of offices worldwide, and what that means is you can do a hot desk program if you apply for that with us. So if you're, for example, traveling to Stockholm and need to work out of somewhere, you can apply for our program and work in the WeWork in Stockholm. That's a complement to our landing pad program, which exists in Singapore, Shanghai, Tel Aviv, Berlin, and San Francisco, which is a 90-day residency. So basically, we're opening up the world to you, so you can basically locate your business anywhere you want. I am Key, I cover FinTech, and sorry if I'm speaking really fast, but please grab me. I will have to run to the airport now, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Thanks.
Hayley, that was fantastic. That's so much information. Let's be honest, really touching the surface anyway, but there's just so many countries that you could provide the expertise. Because you have to fly, I guess if there's any other person who wants to ask you any questions, go directly to you, to the email address there.
Yes, please do, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we also have Karen as a backup if you missed the email address. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Literally has to fly. While Karen is setting up at the moment, we have, obviously we've been blessed with some incredibly inspirational speakers. We now have a special feature. It's the first of 2 panel discussions. So with so few women on boards, we wanted to just ask some of the current board members that we know how they managed to get onto boards and how we could go about securing a director's seat. Maybe not now, but keep it in the back of your mind because you just never know. It's something that I have thought about in the last couple of years as I get older. So I'll introduce our amazing inspirational speakers. Alan Sen is the chair of FinTech Australia, and he's passionate about helping more women achieve this great milestone in their career. And he'll be moderating the panel with Mel Mack, who's from FinTech Australia, Laura Anderson from LaunchBig, and Deidre Diamonte, who's the Managing Director of Mia Consulting and the founder of Tech Diversity Awards. So if you'd like to join us on the stage, well, staged area, and I'll pass on my microphone.
Come on down. Wow, Price is Right. That is an interesting claim to fame. Welcome everyone. Things are coming along. Today I've been here for most of the day, and let me just start by saying what an amazing job Karen's done orchestrating today. I know how hard she's worked over the course of not only maybe the microphone. So I know how hard Karen's worked over the course of the day and also over the last few weeks to organise today. So thank you, Karen. I found the day really inspirational and interesting. So maybe let's put our hands together for Karen. So I've got the great pleasure of moderating this panel. All the panelists have been introduced. Let me just say that having worked with some of the panelists here, they are all immensely qualified to speak to the topic of how to get onto a board. Quick question, put your hand up if you're currently sitting on a board. Amazing. And who aspires to sit on a board in the room? Great, cool. It's a good mix of current board members and people who one day aspire to be a board member. I know when I first started on the board of FinTech Australia, I found it to be a really daunting task, and have learnt a lot over the last couple of years about the challenges that come with being a board member. So, on that note, though, enough about me. Let me just start with a question. So, what made you first want to join a board, Mel? I'll start with you because you're closest.
So, is this on? Cool, thanks. Okay. So I joined FinTech Australia, and I should say I have actually just stepped off the board, like from the last couple of weeks. But I joined because I had been working as a PR consultant with FinTech Australia, and I moved into an in-house role. And my boss at the time decided, he sort of floated the idea with me that it would be good for me to put my hand up to run for the FinTech Australia board that year, and so I did, and I got on, which was great. So it's kind of a mix of, I was obviously interested in it, but also a couple of people recommended that I put my hand up for it, which gave me a good boost of confidence to go for it.
So for me, it's to give back. It's really important to be able to contribute.
I don't know if can you guys hear me?
Okay. Sorry, Carmel. It's really important to give back to the community and to my local community. And it's also, I have a really strong passion for supporting business, particularly small to medium-sized businesses. So whatever I can do in that space. So it's very much about contributing and giving back.
Great. Laura?
What motivated me to go on
Yeah.
board? Really interesting. Well, first I want to thank you. You are such an advocate for all the things that we're doing. I mean, you walk the talk, so thank you, Alan.
Thank you. That's really lovely. Thanks a lot.
So, and we're so honored to be here. A little bit, I guess, I've been around a little while, and, gosh, going back to when I first went on boards, it's 35 years ago. And so what do I do? But I think it's really important that you understand what a board's all about, and again, why do you want to go on it? Do you aspire to be on a board? I'm not sure. I mean, it could be. It sounds like a really prestigious role, doesn't it? And it's almost like you feel you have a rite of passage to finally get there. But to be honest with you, it's not for everyone. Why did I initially go, and I'll explain why perhaps later. Why did I initially go on boards? I think I believe strongly in opting in, right? So if you, again, want to make a contribution, there's all sorts of ways to make a contribution. And one of those ways is to be in a governance role. But there's certain things that being on a board does not enable you to do, and it's important that you understand the difference in those two. So I started out, I was always in an executive role, I was an entrepreneur, I kind of worked the big company and then the entrepreneurship. And so for me, being on boards, it was just I'd set things up and then someone had to govern them. And I grew up in the US, as you can hear from my accent, but it's been 30 years, believe it or not. And there it's typically your president, your chairman and president, so it's a dual role, whereas they separate those duties here. So I guess that's probably how I started. And I did a lot of work in the philanthropic sector as I was in my executive roles, and so again, it's a nice way to give back in the charitable sector, and it's usually a good way to start as well. So that was how I got involved.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I get consistently asked around joining boards is, what is the process like? Right? So, and you'll find most of the questions I'm going to ask today are relatively tactical questions, because I tend to get, for example, when I speak to people who aspire to be on boards, they ask, okay, how do I go about doing this? What is the process? What does it look like to actually begin the journey to be a board member? So, Mel, I sort of know the answer to this when I ask you, but what was the process like for you joining the board of FinTech Australia?
So joining FinTech Australia at a practical level, I think for me, because I've been working with FinTech Australia as a consultant, I had a lot of insight, at least operationally, into how it was working at the time. And that was really useful. It gave me a good understanding of what FinTech Australia was about, what it stood for, and I really had enjoyed that work. So then when I kind of flipped into an in-house role and was able to consider that as an opportunity, the process was relatively straightforward. FinTech Australia, you can apply before the AGM, put your hand up to be a director, and then essentially you get voted onto the board by the FinTech Australia members. So, I mean, part of that is, I guess, thinking about why you want to be on the board and talking to people about it, and you know, presenting yourself to members, people that would vote you on before the voting process and before the AGM. So there's a little bit that does go into it, but I think it is a good process that we have.
Yes, I agree 100%. You've got to network. You've got to build your relationships. So I'm on 4 different boards in different sectors: banking, technology, education, and I'm a generalist. My background is government, so I'm not a banker. Not really a technologist either, but it's how you contribute within those circles where you engage, you network, you hang out at events, you support through different avenues. So for example, with Bendigo Bank, I was a judge in the business awards that they were sponsoring, so I got myself known. So hang out where these groups hang out and start to network. And yes, you have to go through a formal process. So
It's very frustrating.
It is.
the AAAA, which I'm the chair of the Victorian Council, we had to go through a formal election, which is always a bit nerve-wracking, but you've just got to put yourself out there and, as the previous speaker said, have resilience. The bank, there was quite a long process, because that's also a non-executive role. So you've got to put yourself out there, but you've got to network at the beginning, and you've got to contribute. And certainly I didn't, for some of them I specifically positioned myself because I knew they would be good for my career and my business. But for the other 2, I genuinely wanted to contribute. And so I was involved, and that's when they noticed me. So it's exactly like Laura said, sometimes you do it because it's good for your career, but
Sometimes you just do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's undiscussed actually, the work that goes into becoming visible, and I think there's some instances as well, if I think about it in my experience, there's a serendipitous element to it, which is you sometimes meet a board member or you meet someone from an organisation and you get passionate about it, and really want to contribute back. But there is definitely an element where you have to sort of make yourself visible and known. And then what sits with that, I tend to find, having now sat through three elections on the FinTech Australia board, it's also making clear what, for a lack of a better phrase, your value proposition is, and how you can contribute and what you can actually provide of value. I think is a good element to that as well. Laura, your experience?
Yeah, perhaps if I frame it a little bit different, and just to add some additional value. I guess I'll look at it as just in the back of the room right now. I had certain things, and someone was interviewing for a board, and she's amazing. She's, an executive at Rio Tinto, and so there were certain things that she was reaching out to me to act as a kind of an advisor, mentor, kind of supporter and referee for her. So in answering the question, maybe what I'll do is I'll share, if it's okay, just a couple little bits about what being on a board is and what it's not, and then what as a chair I look for, and then how I might mentor. Was that going too far? Okay. So I guess first of all, what is a board about and what is it not? I think if you're looking to be really hands-on, it's really not for you, unless you want to be on a charitable board and an industry board. Those two, you can get quite hands-on. But as you go further and further and deeper into governance, a publicly listed board, there has to be a real line between executives and especially in Australia, right? So, and on a private company board, private family board, again, you can be more hands-on. So it's important understanding what's motivating you and what really gives you satisfaction. If you want to be that one step, if you want to be on, let's say, an ASX listed board, right? You need to really understand it's one step removed. You have to step back. So that can be really frustrating because you may know the answers, right? You may know how to develop amazing strategies or manage risk, and you're not hearing that from the executive team. So you have to find, and this was early in my career when I first started going on listed company boards around the world. One of the things that I found is I learned, my greatest growth was in learning, moving from an executive role into the art of influence. Right? influence. So that's what I call it, the art of influence. And so that's, again, so pick your boards wisely, understand why you're going into that board arena, and then if you then choose to engage, how do you do that? So I explained, maybe really quick, on the charitable foundation board, it's about making a difference. I usually find it's really great getting involved in one of two things: the membership committee, so you start there, and you could start on the committee, and that takes you typically to the board, and the events committee. Those are two excellent things with industry boards and charitable boards, because you're adding value, and so you can go on the subcommittees, which then leads to a board position. I always look for people who make a contribution and opt in versus someone who looks good on paper. And you need to really also have be mega authentic, you know? I mean, you could build a social media profile. It's important your social media doesn't undo you, right? So always be aware of that, but because that's a reputational impact. But the other side is just making sure that whatever you do is authentic, and get a group of, you know, referees around you and people who can really be your advocates. So that's there. On an ASX listed board is very different. So do you want me to comment?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
So ASX or global, so I'll just focus on ASX for now. We can talk about, you know, other listed boards around the world later. But on the ASX listed boards, it's really important. There is that separation of duties, but you really need to, if you're interested, regardless, I'd say go take the AICD course. Thing is, it costs $7,000 to $10,000, right? And but just know, if you know, they're looking at new models and how you can still get accredited. So it's important that you understand roles and responsibilities. That's number one. There's another one that's less expensive that I find, if you're interested in a more global approach, whether it's on industry associations or whatever it might be. It's called NACD. NA is the National Association of Corporate Directors out of Washington, D.C. They have amazing educational tools and things like that. So again, I'd encourage you to look at both, and I would encourage you, if you're interested in boards, to immerse yourself in both and understand the differences as well as similarities. So one is making sure you have the basics right under your belt. Now, as a chair, one of the things I do, it's really important if I'm bringing a new director on, there's usually this enthusiasm to make a difference. And my encouragement always is take a deep breath, right? Once you're on the board, take a deep breath, and I use what's called rule of 3. And that means you just go through the process of 3 board meetings, listen, always be prepared, but listen, ask a few questions, but you don't have to prove yourself, right? You're there to listen, you're there to analyze, and then you're there to decide on where you can best add value. And make sure your relationship with the chair, and this is across any type of board, whether it's philanthropic trust, whatever it might be, is always make sure that you're communicating through the chair. If you're trying to go to the executive, unless you're the chair, right? If you're the chair, you work with the CEO. But if not, you always report back through the chair, as everyone here would know, and otherwise you disrupt the organization. So that's an important learning. I can't begin to tell you how many people comment on new directors on they're either trying to get too involved in executive activities and or they are trying to prove themselves too much, you know, instead of just realizing you've been put on that board because you are there to add a lot of value. Now, 2 things on the board, and then I'll be quiet, but it's really important to set the context, I think, for what we're doing here is there's 2 roles of the board. One is about conformance and compliance, so that's that risk management side. And again, it depends on if you're a lawyer, an accountant, whatever it might be, that might be on that side. Then the other responsibilities of the board are on the performance enhancement. Now, I think that ebbs and flows as our society and industries go through massive change. In the fintech sector, you know, a lot of that might be on conformance and compliance, especially in the big banks at the moment, right? But on the fintech side, like that's all aspirational. So that's about performance enhancement. So again, it's understanding what role you play on that board.
Yeah, no, incredibly well articulated points around. There are just table stakes when you join a board, and a lot of that is understanding sort of the compliance piece and your role as you know, in that element of the business, but then also in terms of performance, working with the executive team or whoever is operational in the business to help them where you can, and really listening. I think one of the things that is surprising to a lot of first-time board members is how much time you actually spend listening versus speaking. So just coming back again, sort of, just conscious that, most people are sort of, there are a number of people who are, aspiring to be on boards. What was it like the first time you joined? Just thinking about that experience, was it what you expected? Was it completely different? Did it sort of change your mind in terms of what, the role would look like, or did it sort of meet expectations? No? What was it like when you joined the board?
I think, so FinTech Australia was my first board, and I definitely have learned a lot in the last year. I think for joining an industry board like FinTech Australia, I knew that it would take a lot of time and headspace, but I think at least definitely initially probably took more than anticipated. And a couple of things for me personally was moving from having previously worked with FinTech Australia as a consultant onto the board. I also had to manage how I used my skill set on the board to add value without kind of maintaining that operational consultancy role. So I had to draw some clear lines. And that was a bit of a learning curve for me because I like to be very helpful and I'm also can be proactive, but just knowing when to pull back.
100%. It's always a challenge.
I just echo what Laura said. The industry boards are different. The two company boards, it's a big responsibility. And I think you sit there and I really value those words. You spend the first 3 meetings just listening. It's a big responsibility. You're looking at a lot of confidential information. Compliance is a very big thing. And it's actually a lot of work. So I would probably say for each board I'm on, I would spend at least 8 hours a week in reading and reviewing, some training, and again, echoing what Laura said, I also do a lot of courses through the Governance Institute. So if you are interested in board work or even seeing, is it for me, have a look at the Governance Institute. It may be a lower cost option.
Then AICD. Special microphones for that.
I have a very special one, yes, we both do. But yeah, it's a big responsibility. It's incredibly rewarding, but you very much have to mind your P's and Q's as well. Like it's not, yeah.
I guess, as I'm looking at boards and evaluating which ones you might get involved in, one of the things that I always look at, it is a time commitment, isn't it? But again, it's time versus return. Sometimes it's a financial return, sometimes it's perhaps enhancing your brand, sometimes it's about learning and education. There's a variety of reasons, again, why you might go onto a board. But I would say, again, industry and philanthropic organizations, you usually have to put in more time, and then the financial return is probably less, right? In ASX listed company boards, its return is higher. Amount of time, what I do is I look at the number of meetings per year, and typically, 6 to 8 is about right, whereas you're in the kind of the institutes and the industry and the philanthropic, it could be 12, or more. And then there's usually always 1 or 2 strategy sessions that are usually a day or 2 in duration. So I look at that, I always try and understand what are the expectations on time, and then what's the return, whether it's financial or otherwise. And then the other thing that I do as far as budgeting my time, I look, it's usually about, I take whatever time is in a meeting times 3. And back to your point, so I usually budget the equal amount of time that's in the meeting for prep, and then the equal time as a follow-up and kind of thinking through and debriefing. And so that's how I budget my time. And then in addition to that is just immersing yourself in other things that relate to that company or sector.
As chair, can I ask a selfish question? Because I'm just curious. As chair, how do you think about your time? Because obviously being a board member versus the chair sort of is a different time component and a different set of, love to pick your brain about skills as well. So in terms of time component, Laura, how do you think about time versus being a board member versus the chair?
No, great question, because I then take that analysis, right, times 3 as chair. Because, so that's 9 times the amount of time you put into a meeting, right? So you start saying how many organizations can you effectively chair versus being on the board. So, and then a subcommittee chair is usually twice the amount. So that's how I budget my time. And so I usually find 2 solid chairs plus maybe 3 director roles. That is manageable, you know. And so again, that's usually how I do it.
It's definitely, having done it for, whoops, now I'm afflicted with the mic issue. Definitely it's a different time commitment, indeed. What advice would you give to those that are contemplating joining a board, or who are early in their career around thinking through joining a board? What advice would you give them to prepare them, or to maybe just give them some general advice around joining a board? Mel, what would you say?
About how to join the board?
Well, more just general advice around how you would sort of think about it, what you would find, what did you find to be interesting from your experience that you want to pass on?
Okay, so I guess I got some really good advice when I first joined FinTech Australia board. That proved very helpful. I don't have a financial background. My background is journalism, marketing, communications. So the person that I was speaking to said, make sure you try to understand the financials and be across them, because it's very important no matter what your background is for any board, as well as taking your own minutes, so you have your own record of each board meeting and any kind of other conversations that you have around it. I thought, I think those were very helpful pieces of advice for someone who didn't have, I guess, a great understanding of what it would be like to be on the board initially. And then looking back on the last year, I would say I think getting involved in things that match your skill set has been really valuable for me. So I've been the board lead on the Open Banking Policy Working Group, and that's been great for just being involved in a policy like that. Even though it has been extra time commitment as well, I think that's really valuable, especially on an industry body board like this.
So, adding to what's been said, it's important to put yourself out there. It's important to let people know that it's something that you want, so that you can be approached. And I found that very hard to do, but my vision board this beginning of last year was to do more in this space. And so you have to put yourself out there. Make yourself available. I know how precious time is, but sometimes you do have to go to events and network. You do have to contribute to subcommittees as well. So don't spread yourself too thin. Think of the 1 or 2 spaces you really want to be in and how you can contribute. But just on the contribution, so for example in the bank, my background is science. I'm a geologist. And then I went into government, so I've got a lot of public policy and governance. So I would never have thought I would be on the board of a bank. But you have to think of all the other skills you can bring. So they were interested in me in terms of communications and governance and community development, because it's such a strong community feel in Bendigo Bank. So have a look at what skills you can bring, but don't necessarily think, oh, I'm not in that sector, so I can't position myself there, because they actually want different skills. They don't want a whole bunch of bankers or lawyers. So it's really important to understand what value you can bring, pinpoint 1 or 2 sectors or areas you want to hang out, and then just really start contributing, and it will happen.
Yeah, no, I support everything you both said. Perhaps just another perspective on it is, like if I'm evaluating whether I want to go on as chair or whether I want to go on as a director. As a chair, it's really important you understand who the stakeholders are and the shareholders, without a doubt. You have to understand the makeup, the number, whether it's a small group or a large group, because there's all sorts of different things that go with that. As a director, if you're looking to go on the board as a company director, I look at 2 really important things. So first, what I do is I do my own research in the market. I usually go like UBS and the other investment banks, put out all sorts of papers on industry trends and then the relative position of an organization, so I do that research. I always ask for a copy of the strategy, and so really important that I understand their perspective on how they'll create competitive advantage and comparative advantage. And then I asked for a copy of the skills matrix. So usually any well-run board would have a list of what their capabilities they feel are required at the board level are, and then what the composition of each of the members of that board and where they contribute. And then understand, therefore, you know, what skills you bring to that skills matrix. So that's where I would start. But let's assume you tick every box there and you're excited, right? What's next? For me, this is fundamental, because this is go, no go. And I look at two things. I look at the chair, without a doubt, because the chair is the curator of the culture in that board, right, in the boardroom. Then, so I look at that, and I look at, you know, sometimes there's some disenfranchisement in the composition of the board, so I try and understand the board members, but the chair is a given. Like, you have to make sure you're happy with the chair. You're not going to fight the chair, right? It has to be right, and so you're in, make sure that that works well and culturally you're aligned, and they'll support you, right, that they're on board. Second thing I look at is the relationship between the chair and the CEO, because that is fundamental, and if that's not working, that lack of harmony will just, regardless of how great the strategy is or how effective each board member is individually, right, you're just not going to get the traction and you won't achieve your performance objectives. You might tick boxes on conformance and compliance, right, but it's not going to be very fun, and there'll be disharmony. So I just prefer to live my life in a different way, you know, but those are the things that I think are really important. So.
That's really great. Before I throw to questions, one last one. I mean, one thing, and Mel, I'll get you to speak about this versus me. At FinTech Australia, we really thought deeply about diversity on our board, and we did some things in our constitution to sort of really provide for that, because we think it's an important issue. Mel, and I'm interested in everyone's opinion on this. How do you ensure there's some degree of diversity on the board? And I mean, I want to take this broad. I don't want to just keep this as a male-female thing. Let's think more broadly. How do you sort of generate that either practical diversity on the board or a sense that there is inclusion amongst those on the board? Mel, from an FA perspective, what did we do to try to create some sense of diversity on the board?
FinTech Australia has in its constitution set up for diversity in terms of gender and also state-based. So it is a national peak body, and because of that we have rules so that we have diversity of states represented on the board. Both of those things I think are very important and have been really valuable for the industry. FinTech as an industry is relatively male-dominated still, but I feel that from its inception, the FinTech Australia board has been able to showcase the excellent female leaders in the space. And really from the peak body perspective, I think gender particularly has been highlighted and
driven as an issue.
Also I think on the board something that at least I know that you've looked at and the current board has looked at is diversity of skill set and making sure that we have that across the current board. Which is also really valuable because we cover a huge range of issues and it is really important to have different perspectives on those and people that have different understandings and companies that are coming from different places within the industry. So we need that representation to reflect the member base as well.
So for us, we have to seek them out. It's really important. We have to approach people, we have to have dialogue with different people. In some of the boards we have, it's a role almost like an associate or an observer. We can't call them a director, but they're observers or associates. We try and get a lot of younger people through. We have relationships with disability organisations to get people with very different backgrounds, not just male, female. And it's about just constantly building that pipeline. So we might have, for example, 2 or 3 observers on the board, and they could go from 3 months to 2 years. So they don't have voting rights or anything like that, but it's to try and build that pipeline. We do a lot of partnerships with universities. In the AAAA, it's a lot of tapping on the shoulders, hanging out in different places. So diversity it's critical, and it's critical in how we make decisions and how we all think differently in the conversations we have. So we have to be very active. We have to seek people out and manage them in different ways, knowing that people will feel certain levels of discomfort as well being on board, so we have to manage that as well. I believe in diversity in all its forms, and I think the only way to succeed into the future is to harness, embrace, leverage in all its forms. So it's definitely, I mean, of course, gender, 50% of the population, and we are dealing with the future of work and comprehensive workforce participation, that's one. Age diversity, another one, really big, isn't it? Cultural diversity, huge. Look at our multicultural community. So in Australia as well as globally. And so to do that, I always start with, again, the chair, right? So the culture is set at that level. Understanding the stakeholders as well, really important. And, but no, I'm a mega advocate, you know, I get out there. It depends on who the shareholders are if I'm chairing, right? But as a chair, you can curate boards a little bit easier than, you know, just influencing at the director level. And so for me, I like back in the early 80s, yeah, a long time ago, sorry. Pretty old right now, but I'm not forever young, I believe in. We can talk about that later. But, you know, so Motorola, like super, it was all men, you know, and it was really, it was incredible. And I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was just kind of out there doing my thing. And you know the Taylor Swift song, Shake It Up? You know? And so again, we say opt in and back yourself, really important. But, you know, what happened is, I was doing some like specialist work there, but there was, we were able to get a young person on the board, a 25-year-old, into a board that had, the youngest person was like 56. Yeah, it was just, oh my gosh, you know, and they were in a technology business that was evolving quickly, semiconductors and all sorts of things. So, but that took a lot, and it took the chair to really back that individual. And fast forward to today, right? Oh my gosh, how are we dealing with boards that are still so male dominated? So sometimes you need some real advocacy, don't you? And it has to come from the chair as well as the stakeholder group. So I remember Phil, yeah, what did he do? You know, he had the panel pledge, you know, fabulous. So it's things like that. People need to take a stand. And I'm just over today at the Sport Tech, you know, conference, and again, same thing, a room of like 200 people, and this one there were 3 women, you know, and it's just not right. And I think you come back to one of the things we did at the Just Group. That was my first ASX listed board, and that's where I was talking about the art of influence, understanding the role that you play. But what we did is we used as a leverage something that people could understand, the demographic of the executives and the customers. And so that's really important. So understanding the users of your service. And that's where in financial services, oh my gosh, you know, women are out there. They spend money, they make buying decisions. So, you know, who do you see as your customer? And I think if you can architect something that's much more relevant and broader, which means the strategy is more effective, then you'll be successful.
Yeah, and the other thing that I tend to look for, and just generally outside of boards as well, is diversity of thinking. That's a very important one in terms of bringing different ideas to the table.
And expression.
Yeah.
You know, like look at me with my hands, you know, but sometimes I have my glasses on and kind of look over my glasses. So you have to understand the environment.
I'll watch out for that one. that probably means something serious is happening.
But even in how decisions are made, so when you have all male boards, I'm generalising here, you might not get as much compromising. Just the way decisions are made is so different when you have diversity, not even the content, but the process of getting there. One can have more groupthink, one can't. Like it's fascinating. It's fun.
Yeah, it's an interesting microcosm of interaction and decision making in a boardroom, that's for sure. Let's start to the audience for questions. Karen, do you want to moderate the time on this one? I know we're running a little late, so maybe a question or two. Have we got time for a question or two?
I'm super lucky that I do report to a board that is probably 50-50 male or female. How do you feel, sometimes I know particularly on corporate or ASX listed boards, there's an attitude that women are there as making up quotas. How do you feel about quotas for diversity on boards, and have you ever felt like you were there not on merit but there for quota?
Okay. There's a program called Male Advocate or Champions for Change, and AICD put that in place. And there's a fantastic video that was put up that I'll
I'll make sure you guys have a hold of it because it's amazing. It really articulates that challenge. But did I ever feel I was put there because I was a woman? I guess I was fortunate that probably not. Only that I came from outside into the community. Does that make sense? And I had a specialty. I'm an applied mathematician, so I had certain skills that were kind of different and unique. So, but I do see it and I hear it, and I hear people say that oh, it's just because it's women or something else. But that's minimizing. I see that we're getting past that, thank goodness, you know. And there are so many, as we know, so many amazing talents out there. And if you embrace that concept of diversity, I try and be gender agnostic. And I know in all the teams, things I've ever done, I never think about gender. I never talk about it. But for some reason, it always ends up almost 50-50. I don't know why, but it does. And but I agree with you. Sometimes that dialogue does happen, and I do hear it. Sometimes they forget that I'm a woman sitting there listening to it, you know. But I think we're moving past it, but we still have to be just merit-based. But darn it, sometimes you have to do a little bit of advocacy. So.
Just one comment. So I never was comfortable with quotas, but I am now more comfortable with quotas because things aren't moving as they should be moving. And so I think all of us as senior professional women, we have to take one for the team. We've got a louder voice than more junior women just starting in the workforce. And I think we have to accept that we do need to have quotas. We need to make space. We need to encourage young women to move into these professions, to move into boards. So we do need to have quotas. And as I said, I wasn't comfortable with it. I'm on the board of a digital services company. It's just astonishing. There are no females there. And they say, no, Deirdre, you're not on this because you're a woman. I said, it doesn't bother me. I'm here now, I'm contributing, and let's make some space for other women. So I think we just have to take one for the team, and whether we're comfortable or not, say, yep, we do need quotas. Adrian?
It's not a gender-based question, but just I think a really important issue for the audience you might be able to enlighten us on, and that is around the risk of personal liability. There's not an insignificant risk of being sued as a director on a board. If you haven't addressed it, it's obviously not front of mind for you. But just in terms of people at a later stage in their career that possibly accumulated significant assets, how should they be thinking about protecting those assets? And managing the risk of not being sued to start with is probably very important.
Well, I'll give you one, because I had to think about this. I've been a director of a few companies now. So, structure your affairs appropriately, right? That's the simple answer, which is quite practically don't own assets. If you're going to be on boards, and there's a bunch of tax structure you can do. That's what I think most prudent people would do, because you're right, it's not insignificant, the risk sitting on a board, right? And what I think a lot of people underestimate is how easy it is for something to slip by, right? You can put in the 9 hours to review docs, but you sometimes either miss stuff, or sometimes the picture that's painted by the executive team is not the same as what is reflected in the documents you're presented, and that's then your job to go and dig and ask the questions and get to a level of comfort, because at the end of the day, it is your risk that is it's your not only financial but also your reputational. And then also on top of that, I think it does take a lot of mental space as well in terms of the emotional element to it when you're trying to focus on a range of things in the business, but also then trying to make sure that you're covered from a liability perspective.
Yeah, no, everything you said, agree completely. And I think there's also D&O insurance and other things, but that doesn't affect your reputational risk. And so I always, again, come back to, before I even think about going on a board, reviewing the strategy, understanding the stakeholders, understanding the chair and the CEO and the working relationship. And when you're provided with papers, as Alan said, you may or may not be provided with all the details, but you shouldn't be, because that's why you hire the CEO, right? So it's making sure you have a great CEO, but as a director, I believe in management by walking around. So I participate, and I listen, and I talk. Not to catch people doing things it's wrong, but just to listen and observe, and sometimes it's body language, and you're able to really understand, that if there's areas to be concerned about. So that management by walking around, or directorship by walking around, I believe in very strongly.
And always ask questions. When you read back on cases of where directors are liable for things and things have gone wrong, a lot of it is directors have remained silent. Always ask questions. So don't just say because the CFO has this or the auditor has said this. Always ask questions. And for females, sometimes for me, I found that hard at the beginning because I thought, oh, I don't know. But it's my reputation. Always ask questions.
And your responsibility.
And my responsibility,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And do some training.
Yeah.
Actually, can I ask a quick question? Laura, you particularly mentioned the word strategy. I think that's such an integral component of any business or organisation.
Yeah.
Two-pronged question, just briefly. Who's responsible for the strategy, the direction, the vision? And, what role does the board play on the strategy of the organisation or business?
Just a strategy, two-pronged answer. The first is how strategy is formed. In the olden days, MBA 101, what did we do? We looked at, where have you been, where are you going by when, and then how are you going to get there, right? Traditional strategic planning methodologies. I think we're now in a new era. It's so dynamic and things are changing fast that I flip it on its side. And this is part of my evaluation, I look at the value system, and that's go, no go, right? That's part of risk management, everything else. So cultural alignment and values. Then I look down at the alignment of vision, and that's coming back to relevance. So understanding what are the key industry elements that are happening out there. And so I make sure that there's an alignment, and that requires conversations and research. Then under that, it's all about having a strategic framework that you can sense and respond to new market dynamics that are happening. So you can see it's flipped 90 degrees, and I look at that. Then who develops that, right? I think one board I'm on right now, and it's easy for me to say what I'm saying, but when you get into practice, right, you need to have a voice, and I have a pretty strong voice, but I'll tell you, there's some board, and you have to again behave in a way that aligns with the culture at the board. And there's one board that's a very gentle board, but they're not as vocal as they need to be. And there's certain things that I'm seeing over and over, and I'm not the chair, right? So what I end up doing, so I'm living part of the things we're telling you, don't do this, don't do that. So and how do I speak up most effectively? And it's about effectiveness, isn't it? So the role of the board, I believe, it depends a little bit on the organization, but it should always be, they should set the vision with the executives, goals, expectation on financial returns. Again, it depends on the kind of organization. If it's ASX listed, there's certain ways you behave. If it's charitable or industry, it's another. But so the board with the executive agree on kind of financial returns and expectations, and then kind of strategic things. Then the executive should go away and they should create their plan for achieving that, and they bring it back to the board. The board, at the end of the day, endorses it, but it's developed by the executive. I usually like a facilitator, but not one who develops your strategy, one who facilitates the conversation, because it helps you triangulate. It's not them and us, it's all of us together. That we want a star team versus a team of stars, right? Everybody's united. And then as you go through, I'm a big believer again in one team. You sign off and you go for it. And that's what I keep coming back to. That relationship between the chair and the CEO is critical to the success of any organization.
Any more answers on that one? No. I know we're running short on time, so we're going to go to tea. We'll do one quick question with Sam. I just want to acknowledge a couple of things before we go to Sam. One is, I love, Deidre, that you are succession planning a board by having observers. I've never heard of that. And I just think, that is beyond amazing, so we should all learn from that. And also, thinking about the structure of the board from a male-female perspective. I think, again, you guys at FinTech Australia, good on you for thinking about that. I know a lot of us women are probably too scared to ask about how to get on a board or, make that first inquiry, and I think you guys are really trailblazing by doing those things. So I want to say thank you to all of you. I'll just hand over to Sam for one last question.
No, we were really, I just while the mic's going, we were really lucky. Not only did we do that and the state thing, which I think is really important for a national organisation. A lot of nationally based organisations don't necessarily think about that. But I was just personally lucky that the two previous chairs had allowed for a little bit of coaching to help me personally to develop as a board member, and then helped me to sort of understand what that chair role looked like. It doesn't necessarily always happen on a board, so we were really lucky from personally, but also I think as a board, we've been, and previous boards have been really thoughtful about how they think about diversity as a broader question, not only one that revolves around gender. So we've been incredibly lucky by having really thoughtful board members and chairs previously.
I'm Samantha Jewell. Just to say thank you to both of you, Lauren and Deirdre, especially because of your expertise, but how often particularly in the fintech space, have you come up against decisions that I know as a board you have to come to a collective agreement that you absolutely categorically disagreed with? And my understanding is that the only option you really have is to actually leave the board because you're liable for a decision you may feel is really not good from a liability point of view. How often, or if at all, have you had to actually leave a board over those sort of things?
Yeah, no, I've never either. It doesn't mean you disagree. It doesn't mean you don't disagree. As a matter of fact, you hope you bring out a diversity of thought and opinions. But when you walk out of the boardroom, there's clarity of understanding. But I have voted, again, there was a CEO appointment in one of the organizations I was on, and I didn't agree with that appointment. I didn't leave the board, but you know, I backed myself. I backed my instincts, and it proved to be right, you know. But you have to be brave, you know. And I was uncomfortable, and I thought, no, I'm going to do it, like you were saying. So there's things like that. So there are times that you disagree, and you will vote. That's why there's votes. And board, it's not always unanimous. But again, hopefully the chair can bring everything out, and you get to hopefully consensus most of the time.
Yeah, I've never had that experience, thankfully, so it would be very uncomfortable. There have been only one or two instances where I haven't voted in favour of, but I had done a lot of homework before and spoken to the chair, and I wasn't in favour of it, but it didn't mean that I thought it was going to put the company in a position that they shouldn't be in.
Or your reputation.
Or my reputation, no.
It'd be pretty dysfunctional board if that happened. Like, it would have to be crazy dysfunctional, because I mean, there are things that you'll always disagree on, but that's part of, well, one, the chair's role is to sort of corral people and make sure that everyone's on the same page, and that doesn't mean everyone has to agree, but everyone should understand what the decision is and why it's being made, and that's you know, part of the chair's role. And I think actually, to be honest, the rest of the board is to really get on board with it, because the worst thing you can have is actually that scenario where it's like commit and everyone diverges. If it's commit, then it's all in one direction and you've got to all go. But I don't know, I've never had that either. It would be hyper dysfunctional if that happened.
And then you should leave the board, right?
You should leave the board.
Yeah, 100% should leave that board. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you again, Karen. And thank you, speakers, for your
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Alan Sen, the chair of FinTech Australia, Mel Mack, FinTech Australia, Deirdre Del Monte, the Managing Director of Mere Consulting and the founder of Tech Diversity Awards, and Laura Anderson from Launch Vic. Amazing, thank you, great experience and knowledge.
Thank you very much.
We're going to now have a short tea break, and then we're coming back with a really important adjunct to what we've just heard now. It's all about how to get funding. So let's have a short tea break, be back in about 15 minutes. We'll kick off with our last panel discussion. Thank you.
You guys mind if we get a team photo? Would you like me to take the team photo?
You don't mind? You're
Thank you.